Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my November wrap-up. I didn't do November TBR, but I guess you get what you get from me, particularly this month. So I had an interesting reading month. I really enjoyed myself. Definitely had some ups and downs, which was partially my fault because I was planning on doing this video where I read the lowest rated books on my Goodreads want to read shelf. So I read a couple of those, which explains a few of my lower ratings, but I'm glad I did. And I will be going through all of them in the order that I read them. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. The first book that I read in November is called Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells. And this is the third book in the Murderbot series. So it's a sci-fi series. They're all novellas, and it is about this robot. He calls himself Murderbot, and basically he was created as a security robot, and he manages to hack his sort of governor module, so he has free will. And the thing with him is that he really just wants to be left alone to watch his media. So he just wants to watch TV and be left in peace. But of course, he has some morality to him, so he ends up involved in a bunch of adventures where he's saving people. He has such a great sense of humor. Like when I first saw this series, I kind of thought, oh, this is going to be kind of a heavy, dark sci-fi, but it's actually really light and very funny, and there's all these different characters involved. And in the third book, I think this was maybe one of my favorites so far because of this one particular character. But man, I really highly recommend it to anybody who's looking for something in the sci-fi genre, but maybe light and easy to read. And I picked this one up for the first time as an audiobook, and I thought it was fairly well done. So if you're interested in audiobooks, this is definitely one for you. No regrets picking this one up. The next one I read is part of that low-rated books video that I never created. It's called The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling, and this is a book that came out recently, so everybody's been picking it up this time of year. And it was interesting because when I picked it up, I think it had sort of like a 3.46 or something like that rating, and now, like I just looked, it's 4.32, so apparently it's not getting a lot of love from the booktube and reading community. But I did think that it had some really good aspects to it. So The Death of Jane Lawrence is a gothic horror about a woman named Jane Lawrence, and she is a very independent woman. She's an orphan, and she's in that era where, women can't be fully independent. They depend on men. So she's decided that she is going to enter into a marriage of convenience to a man. She's selected this surgeon, Mr. Lawrence, and she tries to convince him into this marriage so that she can kind of continue on her independent lifestyle, because she just is a woman who loves math and just wants to study and work with numbers. And he agrees to it on the one condition that she never go to his family manor up on the hill. And then, of course, she does for various reasons, and this sort of horror ensues. It is a very strong read in terms of, I guess, the writing style. Like, it's well written, and the gothic atmosphere is really good. And there's a few horror scenes which are like legitimately creepy. But man, it just kept getting weirder. There's this occult element that enters in sort of part of the way through. And there's just so many moments where you're like, girl, can you just like take a step back, like maybe leave the manor, that seems like a good idea, and like regroup. Also, you married this guy after a week and you're like doing some like crazy stuff for him. So it was one of those ones where you're like, come on, like just make better choices. And then the ending, like, is just so strange. I read it and I'm a fairly, like, I don't think I'm dumb, but I really could not figure out what happened in the end. It's probably one of those ones where, like, if I went back and kind of like slowly made my way through it, I could probably figure out what happened, but I'm not going to. So And I think that's why most people are giving it a poor rating, is because of the very, very strange ending. So make of that what you will. I gave it 3 stars. It's awesome for this time of year, or, you know, maybe not December, but October, November spooky season. So if it at all seems interesting to you, maybe give it a go, but do go into it knowing that many people are not loving it. Okay, so moving on, the next book was also one of those ones in my, you know, low rated TBR. I picked up One Night, Two Souls Went Walking by Ellen Cooney. And this was just a short book that I saw on a table in the library. You know, you walk into the library and they kind of have like books with a theme. I picked it up and it sounded really sweet and potentially beautiful, so I thought I'd give it a try. It is about a woman who is a chaplain in a hospital, and she's on the night shift. She's had some sort of heartbreak. She's just been unlucky in love, and she basically, it follows her during one night on this night shift as she goes to her different patients, and she tries to give them comfort as she's sort of dealing with her own issues and, you know, self-doubt. On the back cover, it sounded like it would just be this beautiful story with these like touching moments with these different characters, and then this maybe magical element with this dog ghost. Anyways, I really didn't feel like it lived up to the back cover. A book like this, like, it's really meant to be character driven, and you're really hoping that these moments with these different people are, you know, going to be touching or moving. But I really didn't like buy in to anything. I didn't connect to any character, and I really felt like this woman was just, it was just depressing. So I get the low rating. I thought that the writing was very strange too. It was one of those ones where there's a couple moments at the beginning where like a sentence like literally made no sense. And I thought to myself, oh, like, is this something that the author's doing? And maybe this woman is like, got like early onset dementia, and we're like gonna deal with this like interesting twist. No, it really let me down. And so I don't recommend picking it up. I think this one deserves to be at the bottom of the heap. But that's okay. I gave it a go, gave it 2 stars, and moved on to another novella. I was really into short books this month, which is really fun. It's definitely one, I wasn't in a reading slump, but I was definitely not willing to tackle anything too difficult. And so I picked up A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. And I think this book has such an incredible title and such an incredible cover. It's one of those ones I really picked up because I was like, whoa, this looks amazing. And I read To Be Taught If Fortunate, which is another sci-fi novella by Becky Chambers, and I really loved it. But brace yourselves, because I'm about to give you a very unpopular opinion. So don't give me any hate. This is just my personal opinion. If you loved it, that's awesome. But I really thought this was terrible, but terrible in the most like fascinating way, because I felt like it really gave us some insight into the time that we're living in. So gave it 2 stars, not because I think it, like, Becky Chambers is a very good writer, but I think this book really showed what people value in the confusion of our era. And so it's about an agender monk, and, like, you know, awesome for diversity. Becky Chambers is really great for having diverse characters. But my criticism is that diversity, like being agender, does not make a character inherently interesting. There have to be other aspects to the character. So it's about this agender monk in this future agrarian utopian society. The monk is a garden monk, but is dissatisfied with their life, and so they decide to do a career change and become a tea monk. So they get this tiny home that is powered by a bicycle, and they decide to go around the countryside being a tea monk, which is essentially, I guess, a sort of a therapist where you set up shop, serve tea, listen to people. They are very successful at this. They make lots of friends. This monk loves to have sex with clients, which I think is sort of, I don't know, it's a different time. And even though they're wildly successful at this, it still doesn't satisfy them. So they decide, I'm going to go off into the wilderness with my tiny home and I guess, try to find myself. So they do that and they run into a robot, and I'm not going to get into all the details. They don't treat the robot very well, which I think is like another sort of criticism of this. And the robot kind of looks at this person as like, you're making some terrible choices, so I'm going to like go with you and make sure you don't like kill yourself. They go off, find this ruin, and then the last scene is this robot sort of saying like, you know what's wrong with you is that you're trying to find meaning in life. And I don't like look for meaning in life. I just like live. I just follow my bliss. And then it kind of ends. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what happened? Like, what is this book? Because it really does not seem like great advice to somebody who is like, maybe minorly depressed. I know that's a very unpopular opinion, and hopefully, I don't get a lot of hate for that, but I would love to know what you think and what you got out of it, or, what you thought about that book, because I just think it, 20 years from now, we'll be picking this book up and it'll be taught in classes about like, that this was really the zeitgeist of the era. So would love to know what you think. So the next book that I read, I decided to go for a sort of a middle grade fantasy kick, and I picked up Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. And that's the second book in the Nevermore series. And I love this series. It is the first series where I think it is legitimate to say, if you like Harry Potter, this is sort of the next best thing. It is about this girl named Morrigan Crow, and she's part of this magical school in this magical place called Nevermore. I love the setting. Like, the Harry Potter universe is so magical and quirky and whimsical, and this Nevermore is as well. But with that, there's a dark aspect to it as well. So creative. She lives in this magical hotel called the Deucalion, and there's all these great characters, and her bedroom like changes and shifts with her moods or the hotel's moods. It's so fantastic, and it's a great story. If you're looking, like if you're an adult and you loved Harry Potter, definitely pick up this series. Then next, I decided to pick up Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, and then I picked up the audiobook. This one was such a fantastic audiobook. The narrator, and I want to say Dan Stevens, but he can do all the voices so well, and it's a large cast in this book. And so he does Hercule Poirot and all these different characters with different accents, and it was so great. So it's the perfect mystery for this time of year because it's set on a train in winter, and the train is stopped because there's this like a big snow bank and a murder happens, and so they're trying to figure out like who killed this guy. And I thought it was such an entertaining read. I read and then there were none, and so I think this one was just as good. I will say that one criticism I have for Agatha Christie is that she doesn't really give the reader enough information to solve it themselves, but it's still fun. And I tried to actually watch the most recent movie afterwards, and I just couldn't do it because I fell in love with the way this narrator told the story, that I just like couldn't reconcile the difference between how the movie portrayed the characters and how the book does. So I think that's a really good sign that not only like the book is better, but the audiobook is better. So if that sounds awesome to you, I really recommend it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Probably would have given it 5 stars if I felt like the reader could have solved the mystery themselves. I then picked up Malamander by Thomas Taylor. So this is another middle grade fantasy. And again, it's a really good book to pick up this time of year because it's set in sort of the winter in this dark seaside town. It is about Herbie Lemon, who is an orphan. He lives in this hotel, and his job is he's sort of the lost and found boy. And then this girl, and I forget her name, comes to the town and she's looking to figure out what happened to her parents 12 years ago. And there's this mythical creature called the Malamander that sort of factors into the story. If you like the series of unfortunate events, I think you would really like this one. I read a few of the books in that series when I was a kid, and you know how like at first you're like, wow, this is so unique the way it's told, but I found that series kind of got predictable and boring, and I felt similarly about this one. I thought, oh man, like the characters seem good, the setting is really good, but I'm bored. So overall, I'd say it's a 3-star read for me. I thought the atmosphere was really great. Definitely a book to pick up this time of year, but a little bit slow moving for my liking. But the last book that I read was hands down the best one that I read in November. It is called The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander. And this is a young adult, I guess, middle grade fantasy that was actually written in 1964. And I was recommended this on Likewise. It's an app where you can kind of like ask for a recommendation and people can list their recommendations. So I think I was asking for a book that would be good for a 9-year-old who's getting into reading and is looking for fantasy. And man, this book really held up. It could have been written like today. It is about this young boy named Taran. He's an orphan. I guess they're all orphans in these stories. And he lives on this place called Caer Dallben with a sorcerer. And he's basically, a boy who's just growing up and he wants to be a hero really badly. He thinks his life is really boring. And he's an assistant pig keeper, which is a gag that runs like throughout the entire series, I believe. And it's actually pretty funny because everybody's, will be like, well, that's pretty smart of you to say for an assistant pig keeper, or, whatever. You're pretty brave for an assistant pig keeper. So it is a story. It's basically an adventure story with a group of people. And it definitely gives off vibes of Lord of the Rings. Some people criticize it for that, but I'm like, it was so entertaining and definitely a unique story. So if you like Lord of the Rings and you're looking for something quick, or something for a younger person in your life who's not ready to tackle that, I think this is such an incredible series. I've started reading the second book and I'm like already, in love with it the same way that I am with this first one. The thing that makes this one so strong is that it's fast paced, so you don't have to wait long for things to happen. And the characters are phenomenal. They are so funny. Even though the plot is very serious, I loved every single character that was introduced. There's this sort of creature named Gurgi who has a certain way of speaking that's really funny. There's this bard who is, he's a bit of a liar, but he's still brave. And every time he tells a fib, his harp string breaks, which is such a funny gag as well. There's this young girl that comes into the plot, and she's like so smart and so funny. And the way she sort of criticizes, but yet supports Taran is hilarious. And if you're looking for a book with a strong female character, like this one is it. I think that there's maybe 5 books in this series, so I'm just gonna make my way through them and I'm having a blast. So if that sounds good, I would highly recommend it. It's an awesome book for this time of year if you're looking for sort of a short, cozy fantasy adventure. You cannot go wrong with this book, The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander. So anyways, that's all the books that I read in November. Even though there was a few duds, I enjoyed the reading month so much, and would love to know what you read in November, what you're picking up this December if you're looking at sort of the wintry, cozy fantasy books like I am. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing a December TBR, or probably not. I'm hoping to do a video soon about my top books of 2021 and the books I'm hoping to read in 2022. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I will catch you in the next video. Thank you.